As we come together tonight to look at the first lie that was ever told in this world, I'm going to start by posing a question, and I'm going to present several questions tonight that I'm going to allow the Bible to take and give us the answer to each of these questions. But the first question I have for you tonight that I want you to ponder is, where are our beloved dead? Where do we go when we die? There are people who have all kinds of theories on this. Some think that you'll go and haunt houses. Other people believe that you're reincarnated into some other person or creature, depending upon how your life was lived in this world. Some believe that you go to purgatory, and others to heaven or hell, or you go float around on a little pink cloud strumming a harp. You know, I don't have anything against harp music, but after a few million years of that, I'd get pretty bored of it. But these spirits that we see that people are supposedly communicating with, who are these spirits of supposed dead people that communicate with these people on these TV programs and seances and all sorts of other ways? Most of you know that I'm from Missouri. We had a very famous Missourian many years ago by the name of Jesse James. Jesse James came into my hometown once and went to a lawyer friend of his there in a big building on Ohio Street and told him, says, I'm going out by Otterville and I'm going to rob a train. And if I get caught, I want you to represent me. And but he used to go out there and jump off of some of these cliffs over onto the top of these trains. He was very popular in Missouri, and many years ago, the little town of Liberty, Missouri, just between where I live and Kansas City up there, just by Independence, Missouri, read an ad in the paper. And in that ad, they were looking for a psychic to come and communicate with their favorite homeboy. And people thought, to think that a whole city of city fathers are willing to try and go through seances or whatever to communicate with a dead outlaw. Elvis Presley supposedly came back and communicated with Tanya Tucker, according to what she has said, and gave her some ideas for some of her music. Archaeologists oftentimes say that they have been led to their discoveries by the spirits of ancestors. All kinds of concepts out there. I lived in California for several years up on a mountain called Howell Mountain that overlooked the Napa Valley down there. Very beautiful location. But down in the Napa Valley, in the town of St. Helena, right at the foot of the mountain there, lived a lady by the name of Marcy Calhoun. And the St. Helena newspaper came out with an article one time about the 89 lives of Marcy Calhoun. And this newspaper had a big write-up about Marcy. She was a spiritualist that lived in that town. And the paper pointed out that Marcy had lived 89 different lives in the past. And some of those were, she was a servant girl in the palace of Amenhotep between 1375 and 1358 BC. Besides that, she was also a witch twice. She had 2 lives as a witch. She was also she persecuted Christians in ancient Rome. She was a person who lived in the South during the Civil War. She was burned alive, she says, in France once. She was also buried alive in Germany in one of her lives. She said she was terribly afraid of frogs, and that was probably because she was once supposedly sacrificed to a large reptile idol in China. So this woman got around in the past, didn't she? And people believed her. She believed what she was saying herself. Is there really consciousness after death? Do people get reincarnated and come back again? The Christian church even teaches some of these weird concepts. But back in the 60s, there was an archbishop that created quite a stir in the Christian churches. His name was Pike, Bishop Pike. Some of you may remember him. And the article here is talking about an American bishop's search for a space-age God. You see, the God of today was not good enough for Bishop Pike, and so he was looking for another type of a God that could be accepted by all the hippies and everybody back then. If you look at what Bishop Pike's got around his neck there, he's got the cross there, and the symbol that's at the bottom of the cross, we called it a peace symbol back then, but in reality, in devil worship, it is the eye of the devil. So both of those are hanging around Bishop Pike's neck there. He got into a lot of trouble with his church because his teachings were contrary not only to the Bible, but the teachings of his church. And so he was pretty much ostracized by these people. Well, this poor man's son died on February 4th, 1966. And shortly after his death, strange things began to happen to Bishop Pike. The closet where his son's clothes were hung would frequently have all of the clothes flung to the floor. The closet was tore up. This went on for quite a while, and then something quite unusual began to happen. He began to see things that were being set up on a 140-degree angle. Postcards and things would be stood up on end at that angle. He even found safety pins standing up at that angle. The mirrors on the wall were tilted at the 140-degree angle. And then finally Bishop Pike put it together, and he realized that that was the angle of the clock at the time that his son died. And so his son, he thought, was trying to communicate with him. And so he began to delve quite a bit into spiritualism, trying to communicate with the dead, especially with his son. He began to attend seances and try to conjure up the ghost of his son so that he could communicate with them. Books were written on this subject, and I want you to see something from the book, The Other Side, of what his son told him. Here's what Bishop Pike's son said. I'm working real hard at learning that being dead is really being more alive. The bishop asked him, have you by now heard anything about Jesus? Answer, I haven't heard anything personally about Jesus. Nobody around me seems to talk about him. When we come over here, we have a choice to remain as we are or to grow in our understanding. Some still seem to be church-minded and are willing to wait, or some to be church-minded and are waiting for a judgment day. But these seem to be the unenlightened ones. Others seem to be expanding their minds and self toward the more Eastern understandings. This is the communication that his son gave him. Nobody talks about Jesus over there where he's at. Again, question. He says, have you heard anything over there about Jesus or a Jesus? Answer, I haven't met him. They talk about him, a mystic, a seer. Yes, a seer. Oh, but Dad, they don't talk about him as a savior, as an example, you see. I would like to tell you, Jesus is triumphant, you know, but it's not like that. Not a savior, that's the important thing, an example. These are the type of messages that supposedly come from the other side. And so these people, including ministers, believe this type of stuff. And astrology and the occult is growing by leaps and bounds in this country. There are over 3,000 astrology columns in the North American newspapers alone. Books and CDs and DVDs on the subject abound. You can find them in almost any type of a bookstore. These near-death experiences have all catapulted into bestsellers. And the Eastern religion, the mysticism, has become very prevalent even within the Christian church today. One lady by the name of Rosemary Brown, several years ago, she wrote several things about the other side or about spiritualism. She said that Liszt, Beethoven, Bach, Brahms, Chopin, and others actually came to her and enabled her to compose over 400 pieces of music. Do these spirits of these dead composers come back? Another lady by the name of Jane Roberts, she wrote the Seth Letters. Some of you may remember those from many years ago. She is also one who wrote the biography of Jean Dixon, one of the most renowned clairvoyants of the past. And I want you to see what Jane Roberts wrote in some of her books. And this first one comes from The World Beyond. She says, all souls have one continuous existence through an infinite number of lives. What's that called? Reincarnation, friends. God exists as the totality of all souls, living and dead, all matter, all energy. There is no heaven, hell, or purgatory except of the soul's own making. Again, in her book, The Search for Truth, notice what she says here. As her spirit thing over there on the other side was giving her these messages. She says, the spirit tells Jane Roberts, your father says the most important story in the world for you to write is this. I live and we are in a world of activity and growth. We are not living in a vacuum. I am vital and just as alive, just as active now as I was when I was a boy. Then Fletcher, one of those spirits, gave this message to her. Fletcher said he sends you his love. He doesn't remember about dying, and he says he hasn't found anyone over here who does. There is no dying. All of us